What's up everyone, welcome back to another video on the JayBee Milly channel. I am JayBee and I just finished watching episode 2 of HBO Max's new Velma show and I've got an awful lot to say about it. Now, in terms of the nature of this kind of review, it's more of a reaction to be honest. This is our initial impressions, so we're not going to go into any spoiler talk, we're not going to show any screenshots from the show, we're just going to keep on this image here and try and veer away from as many spoilers as possible. Now we do have intentions to release full in-depth spoiler full reviews sometime over the weekend. We're going to record and hopefully they'll be out later that night, so if you do want to hear actual, in-depth detail about each specific plot point, then please do stay subscribed and comment down below on what sections you want to see us talk about, because it'll be interesting to gauge what people think about this. So again, you may want to watch the episode for yourself before even listening to this, but we are going to stay relatively spoiler light. So going through the structure of this, we are just going to talk about the start, the middle, and then the end. I don't really want to structure this in terms of things I liked, things I didn't like, just because I want to give a full review, a full scope of exactly the tone of the episode. So yeah, let's get into it. So first and foremost, this is kind of a spoiler, but not really. The episode does start with a previously on section, which was a bit weird to me. They do stylize it so it does fit in with the episode pretty cleanly, but it was a bit like, there's been some fan theories, some speculation that HBO Max gave up on the show, that it predicted it would fail and maybe even wanted it to fail. And so that's why we're seeing 2 episodes released every week to make it just get it out of the way essentially. I don't know if that's how I would phrase it specifically, but essentially just to get the show over and done with. Personally then, for me, I would have just dropped it all at once like a Netflix show. But releasing it 2 episodes a week is kind of weird, and so maybe the inclusion of this previously on section adds credence to that, because if you're releasing 2 at the same time, and that was always the plan, on a streaming service, really a previously on doesn't make sense whatsoever, as it would have been made, scripted, animated and produced with that binge watching or weekly release structure in mind. So I do think that even the start is testament to how HBO Max may actually just be giving up on this project. But like I say, it does factor into the episode pretty cleanly, so whilst it wasn't necessary with how it ended up being released, it wasn't unwelcome at all, to be honest. Now there's a bit of parodying at the start, a bit of tongue-in-cheek humour, and I've got to say, I actually did like that small section. I don't like where it would eventually lead up into. Like, a lot of this thing is either really good setup and then it falls flat, or there's it's a bad setup, but then the odd moment catches you off guard. It is the definition of hit and miss when it comes to humour, as some stuff for me really does land. Like, nothing in this episode made me laugh out loud, but then there's other parts that when they don't work, you visibly cringe. Or at least I did, I don't want to speak for everyone. But yeah, some parts in this I did laugh, other parts I cringed, and the start is nowhere near as bad as the start of episode 1. I stand by that the beginning of episode 1 is nearly unwatchable, to be honest. But this start is actually significantly better. I'm kind of more invested in the story at this point, but don't mistake that for full-blown, I need to see what's going on, I can't not watch it. Don't mistake it for that, because we're not there yet. We may never be there, but definitely I'm a lot more invested than I was at this point within episode 1. The writing remains to be a little bit in your face in terms of, look how modern we are, look how quirky we are. It's not too spoilery to say because we did see it in the trailers, but this is the episode where that dialogue with, you know what 420 is, right? Yeah, it's code for people that still watch animation when they're adults. I don't know if I'm just out of touch. I didn't even get the joke. Like, I actually don't get the joke. Is it, you're 4 years old, but you're 20? I won't even begin to try and speculate. I don't understand the joke, so maybe that's me being out of touch. But personally, I don't understand in this mature Scooby show that we're kind of getting into the realm of juvenile humour. Like, to me, Mystery Incorporated is way more mature than this so far, because we're actually going through a cohesive structure and a narrative storyline, versus crude joke, crass humour, a joke that doesn't land, an out of touch comment. Like, to me, this so far is more juvenile than Mystery Incorporated, and I think that's a problem because I am the opposite of against an adult Scooby show. But my issue at the moment is I am getting decent entertainment, I'm getting a decent adult show, but I'm not getting an adult Scooby show. I don't think that this show can claim to be that, which honestly is a shame because I've always been championing release the James Gunn version of the 2002 movie, and honestly, like, I would have preferred that to this. But, you know, the show does have its merits. Like, we get some returning characters, shall we say, or at least returning talents behind the microphone. And it definitely is welcome. It adds a little bit more legitimacy to this show. And for all people have hated the characterization of Fred especially, I'm going to be the dark horse in this situation and say, I actually do like Fred. Now, he's less endearing to me in this episode than he was in the last episode, but the way that they've written him, it's almost like he's the only self-aware person in this show. Like, everyone else is on Velma time, and Fred's just kind of on his own time, and to that end, with him criticising a lot of what's going on, he's observing things, almost like that, you know, good cop, bad cop type thing. I'm kind of, I don't want to say relating to him, but he's definitely becoming my in character, you know, my perspective character when it comes to a lot of the scenes, in that he's an observer. He's the only one really that's passive in the show. Like, stuff is happening to him. He's reacting to stuff. And I think to make that the situation that it is, it's a little bit uneasy. And there is one moment that was a bit like the first scene in episode 1, which happens kind of within the first, I want to say, 10-15 minutes, and it's just some of the jokes that people make about the characters, and I won't lie, they do get a chuckle out of me, but then you take a step back and think, these characters are in high school, so 16, 17, maybe even younger. And it's like, nothing in this show, nothing that it's come across has necessitated it being in high school. This show could have been in college. And I think, would it have been set in college, some of the jokes would have been a bit less icky. Some of the scenarios would have been a bit less dodgy. And I think it would have been to the show's credit to actually just bump it up a bit. Because some of the jokes people make in this episode, some of the things we saw in the last episode, the fact that they're in high school is so uneasy, like, and maybe I'm just being too sensitive about that. It just isn't my preference to hear people talk about high school kids in that way. I don't, you know what I mean, that's just me. And I do understand the point of view where, oh, so you don't want high schoolers to be seen in this way, you don't want people to talk about them in that way, but you're happy to see them getting killed off if the mystery is right. And that is valid, I'll be honest. Like, if it was a good storyline, if it was a murder mystery in high school, I'd be all for it, but the slightest bit of crassness, I'm not. So there is levels to this. I just think when it comes to this type of situation, you can get your audience on board with hating a killer that preys on high school kids. You can get your audience on board with how sad it is for a high schooler to be killed off, but I don't think you can get a sane amount of your audience to be on board with people making inappropriate comments to high schoolers. Like, I think that may be articulating my point more decently than I have been before, but that was just kind of my take on it. Now let's get on to some of my least favourite parts of the episode. I don't like the characterisation of Daphne at all. I did actually like it in the first episode, but in this one, they just make changes that just seem completely unnecessary, and they do give reasons to why she's acting how she's acting, but they don't really give us a reason to care about them. I mean, they tried that with Velma, you know, we had the kind of flashbacks with Velma in the first episode, and we almost get that for Daphne in this one. It's just, the ends don't meet her goals. It doesn't seem like she's doing a proportionate amount of actions to coincide with her actual motivations. Like, it's kind of overkill what she's doing to achieve her goals, and even if it wasn't overkill, I can think of maybe even more explicit ways to get what she wants that would horrify the audience, but it would get us on board in a sympathetic way if that was the way they went. But let's just say she's potentially selling things in order to raise money for what she justifies as a just cause. And I kind of get it, if you know the channel, if you know my background, you'll know that if anyone's going to relate to her storyline, it's going to be me. And I do. It's just, there's so many levels below what she's doing that could have achieved her goal. And yet the fact that she's just gone completely the other way is like, I don't really like that. Like, that to me isn't who Daphne should be. Daphne is the people person. She is the fighter, the warrior of Mystery Inc. And so to see her just going to such drastic measures and potentially causing harm to other people, that doesn't really sit well with me. Other issues that I had with this episode is we do get a bit legal. Like, there is some, I guess, courtroom scenes, some law scenes, and I know that this is a joke. I'm the last person on planet Earth to come into a show about Daphne, Velma and Fred and go, that's not realistic, this isn't realistic. But having studied a law degree, having studied the Masters of Law qualification, it's very difficult for me to sit through some of these proceedings and even the outcomes of what happens without thinking, no, that isn't proper legal practice, that wouldn't happen in a proper courtroom, and no way would the person on trial have been able to do what they do in that scenario. Like, it is so, like, I don't know, it's just me being a bit of a stickler, I guess, having studied law, but in my own way to justify it, I can kind of go, yeah, I mean, let's just say I studied, UK law, British law, maybe it's different in America, I don't know, but that was kind of my thing. The inconsistencies were a bit jarring. But other than that, here's one thing I did like. I thought that Shaggy, or I guess Norval, being a Twitch streamer, a YouTuber, a content creator, would have been the cringiest thing in the world. We would have got jokes about emojis and hashtags. We have had hashtag humour that was cringy, but I thought that that's what would have happened in Norval's live stream. But actually, I think Norval's live stream is actually kind of interesting what they're doing. It isn't great characterization by any means, or even particularly funny, but I think the way they're handling it, as a content creator myself, is actually kind of relatable. He's just trying to build his content, trying to build his fan base, and I'm there for it, and they don't overhype it like he's, some type of famous person as such, but they use it to get a bit of tongue-in-cheek humour, more to the point where it's as subtle as I would want to make that humour, versus loud, in your face, this is funny, please laugh at us. So I actually did like the part about Norval snacks. I think that that's not going to be my favourite part. I really hope it doesn't become a recurring thing, because then I think it could run a risk of getting tired and boring. But as it was in this episode, I did like it quite a bit. And another thing that I liked happened towards the end. This is most likely going to be our last section, our last point in this video, is something happens that people have speculated on for a long time. People have theorized, and it was meant to happen, I guess, in a different capacity 20 years ago. And I've got to say, it was hinted at throughout this episode, and I didn't like how they were doing it. I thought they were going to make it crass, rude, unnecessary, and a bit too, and I don't like using this term because it seems very buzzwordy, but for the male gaze. I don't know if that's the right word, like for I guess heterosexual male appreciation, gratuitous, a bit like the start of episode 1, let's be honest. But what it happens to be at the end of the episode, I actually am on board with it. I think they handle it not necessarily with the tact of, a more seasoned writing crew, but definitely how they visualize it is pretty endearing, and I'm really curious to see where it goes. I like that it isn't just, I like how it's not for a joke, I like how it isn't gratuitous, and I like that its depth is within an emotional capacity first and foremost. Like, this has got some good potential, I'm just so scared that they ruin it, that they make it into a joke in the next episode, or that they forget about it in the next episode and it was just for, oh look, we're going to put this at the end of the episode to get people excited to watch the next one, to get us trending. Like, if that is the case, then this second bit will be completely void and I will have not liked the ending of this episode. But if they do it right, I think it's what I've been wanting for that type of dynamic. Maybe not necessarily between those two characters, I'll be honest, but it's the type of thing that I've wanted for a little while. So if they do it right, and they've done it right so far, let me be clear, then I'm going to be pretty happy with it. Overall, I did like this episode a lot more than episode 1. But what did you guys think? Have you seen episode 2 of the Velma show? What did you think? And more importantly, for this initial reaction series, how do you think it compared with episode 1 of the Velma show? Very curious to know what people think in the comment section. A part of me just wishes that this was episode 1 and all the cringy jokes were cut out of it, but replaced with the more important scenes from episode 1 being edited into it as a flashback scene. Honestly, that would have been the best way, and I think maybe it would have been received a little bit better, although I think the people that were determined to dislike it would have still disliked it, but that's personal preference. So yeah, if you want to hear a full in-depth review, please like, comment, and subscribe to JayBee Milly.